Lagos, Abuja, and Ogun, and some other states at the moment now are on the lockdown. In these cities, retail banking operations are ground to a halt. Around the country, banks are announcing that branches outside of locations already on lockdown will be running skeletal operations. While Nigeria has one of Africa's largest economies, large proportions of the economy are in the informal sector and depend on cash. Although the central bank has touted a cashless policy for years, several new policies have made that policy muddled. But in countries like Kenya, where mobile money has helped in digitizing minor transactions, the informal nature of Nigeria's economy is not exactly an excuse. The Nigerian government has not embraced mobile money solutions. Instead, the whole brick-and-mortar banks remains kings in the country. As the lockdown goes on, many analysts believe there will be a shift in how retail banking and the country would run at this time. I have the Executive Director, System Specs, Deremi Atanda. He joins me now via Skype from Lekki here in Lagos. Deremi, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Nice to be with you today.
Let's look at this predictions and let's start this way. A lot of online transactions at this time talking about people cannot go out. There is no much with banking at this time. Now, tell us, how has that been? How have you guys been able to manage this pressure?
Well, I guess that's just a natural flow of things. With everyone locked behind doors, transactions must still happen anyway. And that probably brings to the fore the power of technology. Many times we don't realize these things until we have a situation that helps us to appreciate things better. So in the light of people locked down, not being able to go to bank branches, not even agent locations or ATMs, it therefore means that alternative means of transactions need to be undertaken. And if you recall, like your report earlier mentioned, the CBN had been at the forefront of this campaign before now, but adoption probably had not been as fast as expected. But this unusual situation seems to have found home in e-payment and fintech, where there are many more first-time users. There are many more people who now need to find ways around things. So it's not been much of a pressure because systems have been thought through before now. Connections have been made before now, just waiting for the required number of transactions to happen. And you can begin to see that even transactions that were either to not being done are now being done because there are now new types of transactions that are happening. So the general environment of it is that this is a boom time for technology. Now most of the things we have to do, even contacting and engaging, has to be done through technology. And the most prominent of it, if any, is payments, outside of the news that we get from everywhere, payments. Because we like it or not, we're still paying for utilities, the things that keep us indoor. We're still paying for groceries. We're still paying for our subscription to news channels. And king of it, we're still paying for data, which obviously is a new currency.
Indeed. Now, that's my predictions that COVID-19 would give rise to a reinforced adoption of e-payment solutions. Now, what impact will the weakening purchasing power of Nigerians have on the overall growth of the sector?
Well, thanks. When you say the weakened power, purchasing power, I think that that's just going to be global. If anything, the way things are, production is slowing down. Inflation is set to rise. We just saw the data from the National Bureau of Statistics yesterday. But behind all of this, that transactions must still happen. Transactions must happen. And for transactions to happen, people are going to go electronic. The world will never remain the same again. That's a mantra on every lip. And so it's just a leveler. But I think the net benefit will still be in the direction of technology firms and for payment firms, because most of the payments will move electronically, will move to electronic platforms and formats. And so that there's a weakening buying power doesn't stop the average person from still transacting. So growth will be deepened, value may not be as much, but growth will be deepened. On the other hand, you may also see that transaction volumes may actually go up because there will be quite a number of micro payments that will begin to happen. So rather than buy things in bulk, you're buying airtime of 1,000, you probably will break that into 5 transactions. So in terms of transaction count, you may actually grow. In actual value, maybe not, but like I said earlier, ultimately, the growth for fintech is supposed to be on the upward trend. There'll be new use cases for payment that we've not seen before now. There'll be an increased number of first-time adopters and users because this will permeate the hinterland more than it has ever done before now. And we're just going to see that the transformation in the business and normal living environment will continue to stimulate the growth and adoption of payments and fintech.
Now, Jeremy, I'd like you to take us through issues around fintech, which you just touched on. We know what's been happening and challenges faced in implementing some of all of this that has to do with financial technology, and that fear, the challenge of people saying Nigeria is yet to get it right when it comes to technological advancements like this one. How does this come to you? Take us through how far we've gone.
Wow. Well, I don't know where those narratives are still maintained, but anyone looking at the African continent will tell you everything put together, Nigeria is the hotbed of fintech investment, and that can only happen because what people see that's going on here. If nothing was happening here, the world will not be shopping for skills here in Nigeria. Some of the most advanced technology in terms of payment, in terms of security are happening here, and they are not recent developments. And the only thing you can say about that is maybe people outside of this environment are able to perceive that better than those of us who are here, and so they are coming in with their funds to invest. And if you were to look at the investment map in terms of investment in fintech in Africa over the past 3 years, you'll be able to evaluate how much of it has come into Nigeria, the companies that have been invested into and what they're doing, and the rate at which they're expanding beyond Nigeria. So, in summary, the number one thing is great things are happening in payments and fintech right here in Nigeria by Nigerians. 2, these solutions and products are globally competitive and are leaving the shores of Nigeria to be used outside of Nigeria. Number 3 is that the adoption rate is increasing, which is giving credence to the robustness of these solutions. I mean, if you compare the size of the economy of Nigeria and the type of uses to which these solutions are being put, that tells you they can fit into almost any environment outside of Nigeria. So I think it's a historical narrative that maybe not much is happening in the fintech space in Nigeria. It is obvious to every discerning person that things are happening. It is clear that this will be an area for government to focus on. For the new phase of growth, now people are joking that probably palm oil is more expensive than crude oil right now. And while the government has focused on agri, it is clear that it's time to look at all the sources to diversify the national economy. It is time to recognize the technology that has come out of Nigeria and to prepare those for broad-based adoption in the country and then positioning for use elsewhere. Your earlier report had also mentioned one of the programs the CBN will be starting off tomorrow, which is a distribution of funds to people. Just imagine how much of this will be in wallet. You saw the reaction by the public when this was being done in cash. And where the CBN before now had been at the forefront of issuing licenses for mobile money. But it gives government another opportunity to fast-track some of these things, remove whatever layers of bureaucracy might be stifling innovation that can advance us as a country. Where we are now, we can test many things we've assumed or taken for granted. And the wise saying is that you do not prepare for war in the time of war. You prepare for war in the time of peace. We have a unique opportunity to recalibrate our approach to the environment of policy, to stimulate technology development, and that out of that is what drives the economy. And one is privileged to have been part of a few things, but I think this can be further advance the national interest.
Well put together. Already you've identified issues around global crude oil price. We see what's happening. And just like the comparison you said, that's been all over. People commenting around it, talking about the price of crude and palm oil at the moment. Now, you talked about government and palm oil at the moment. Now, you talked about government taking advantage of this sector, which we all know is important if we're looking at diversifying our economy. But don't rule away infrastructure and security challenge when it has to do with the cyberspace.
Well, I mean, the security of the cyberspace is not a local problem, like you said. It's a global challenge. And there isn't anything that's happening out there that's not happening in Nigeria, because the cyberspace is just the cyberspace. It's not locally dimensioned or domained. And if anyone is able to provide solutions in that space, there are standards that everyone needs to pay attention to. Call it what you may. There are many things that people think are negative that play out as positive for us in Nigeria. You remember when the world started labeling us as scammers and con artists in the e-payment space? Then we took that to advantage and started building more secure systems. Because it meant, therefore, that if you could label Nigerians as being so ingenious in codes to be able to attack other systems, it means Nigerians could build robust systems to do that. And so the issue of cybersecurity is just one area where I'm certain that the players in this ecosystem are doing a great deal of things to ensure that we measure up to whatever standards exist. But linking that to government will probably be the approach to the national security architecture, how much of tech architecture and cybersecurity is wired into that, how much of collaboration there is into that, and our outlook, for instance, on securing our data locally. And talking about government again, investing in those things, I would assume that our national IT infrastructure should be one that makes it attractive for indigenous players to want to do things locally. For as long as it becomes cheaper, and it will continue to be more attractive to people out there. So how much will government want to invest upfront to make these things available to people who are working there, whether they're the established ones or the startups? What else needs to change in the environment of business? I mean, we've been talking about ease of doing business. It will be nice to be able to dimension top 5 things that we can all agree going as done for the tech industry to make this happen in quantitative terms. And that's one of the things I said earlier, how we need to begin to deal with the bureaucracies that challenge the intentions. Indeed. I mean, if some of this, if we can better address these things in time instant, when emergencies like this come around, we're going to be the ones who are better off for them. So by and large, the ball is still in our court. We still have a window of opportunity to leverage this current situation in national interest for the advancement of technology to diversify our national source of income.
Now, let's now look at how locally owned technology firms like you, or the ideas you have, how can it be successfully exported internationally, and what competitive advantages do they have over foreign softwares? Take us through that.
Well, you see, many times I think we overemphasize going out without even having exhausted the opportunities that are here. Nigeria is huge. The opportunities are huge. If it wasn't so, many foreign-based businesses wouldn't be coming here. So even for us in the fintech space, we all realize that. So what are we doing? Number one is to deepen collaboration. Let us all stop seeing opportunities in silos. Let us evaluate the potentials in the market space and develop solutions that meet. There's so much to do in Nigeria, so much. I just give an example earlier. I mean, everyone knows of the bankable adults in Nigeria. How many are banked? Today, we're still counting in terms of 40 million, in terms of unique bank accounts. What about the unbanked? Are we reaching them? Are we leveraging technology to do that? In how many places, in how many countries of the world would we have this kind of population to deal with as opportunities? I mean, some of them are even matured markets. So the opportunity still exists here. So what needs to happen, and what we need to do, is to better dimension the opportunities available to us here, and rise to the challenge. And government stands at the heart of this as a stimulator, like I said. Many times, those in government don't even believe or may not be aware that most of the problems we have can be addressed locally. And there have been quite a number of players who since established this. And like you said, we're one of them. I've been around for about 30 years. Technology is the only thing we do. And there are many other people like us who are doing that. So one, let operators in this space better collaborate rather than operate as silo opportunity chasers. And one of the things we're doing in that space is to sign on as many other people to look at problems, dimension problems together, and then create broad-based solutions. In the news recently, you probably will have heard about us partnering with some other organizations like Paga. You probably will have heard us partnering with Celluland, with Nybox. I mean, with established names and startups. So expand the fintech ecosystem, because you can build solutions that reach the lives of people better that way. Number two is that for those of us who are established, sorry, just a minute, to provide opportunity for the upcoming startups. If you also had been in the news recently, we just launched a technology hub called B22, where we've got provision for startups to come and work. I mean, identify startups that can fit the value chain and provide everything, broadband access, space, power, and everything on a 24/7 basis, if need be, for them to do that. Number three is for government to give opportunities to people here, irrespective of where they play. It should be Nigeria first. You can hear other countries saying this country first. When you're going to do anything, can it be Nigeria first? And I think that would be
now, Executive Director, System Specs, Deremi Atanda. That's all we can take for now. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us this time. He's an Executive Director with System Specs. Thank you for joining us on the show.